Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpada Shankaram Lokashankaram Sharada Sharadam Bhoja Vadana Vadanam Bhuje Sarvada Sarvada Smakam Sannidhim Kriyat Shankarupeda Machittam Panki Kritamabhujyaya किङ्करीकस्य सामागा शङ्कराचार्यमाश्रये प्रह्लादवरदो देवो यो नृसिंहः परो हरिः नृसिंहोपासकं नित्यं तं नृसिंहगुरुं भजे श्रीसच्चिदानन्दशिवाभिनव्य नृसिंहभारत्यभिधान्यतीन्द्रान् विद्यानिधीन् मन्त्रनिधीन् सदात्मनिष्ठान् भजे मानवशम्भुरूपान् सदात्मध्याननिरतं विषयेभ्यः पराङ्मुखं नौमि शास्त्रेषु निष्णातं चन्द्रशेखरभारतीं विवेकिनं महाप्रज्ञं धैर्यौदार्यक्षमानिधिं सदाभिनवपूर्वं तं विद्यातीर्थगुरुं भजे अज्ञानां जाह्नवीतीर्थं विद्यातीर्थं विवेकिनां सर्वेषां सुखदं तीर्थं भारतीतीर्थमाश्रये विद्याविनयसम्पन्नं वीतरागं विवेकिनं वन्दे वेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञं विदुशेखरभारतीम् ॐ Verse number 14 of Ātma-bodha. Anadya vidya anirvachya karanopādhiruchyate upadhitritayadanyam atmanamavadharayet. So we had looked at verses 12 to 14, which had described the three kinds of shariras, being the sthula sharira, the physical body, sukshma sharira, the subtle body, karana sharira being the causal body. And in the 14th verse, Acharya Shankara Bhagavatpada had described the Karana Sharira as Anadi, beginningless, avidya, of the nature of ignorance. And here ignorance means the causal ignorance of samsara, the Atma Ajnana, the ignorance of the self as avidya. And the nature of this avidya is that it is anirvachya. Anirvachya means it is sadasat vilakshanam. One cannot say that it is either sat, nor can we say it is asat. It is neither some describable as eternally existent like Brahman, nor can you say that it does not exist at all. Because if you say if it did not exist at all, how to account for samsara? But it is not something which exists all the time like Brahman also. So it is neither sat nor asat, and hence it's anirvachya. One cannot describe it into any category. And it's called a karanopadhi. Karanopadhi ruchyate. And what is the Atma? The Atma is upadhi tritayadanyam atmanam avadharayet, Acharya had said. The Atma or the consciousness principle is something which is different, independent of these three physical bodies. And he had used the technical term upadhi. And what this upadhi term means is that an upadhi is something which transposes its own attributes into something which is upa, samipe, which is close to it. And here the properties of the body and the mind are transposed on to the Atma, leading us to say aham brahmanaha, aham kanaha, aham badiraha, aham mukaha, etc. That I am a brahmana, I am blind, I cannot hear, I am fat, I am tall, I am short. All of these are not properties of consciousness, of not the properties of I. They are properties of the physical body, they are properties of the mind, they are properties of the ego, they are properties of the intellect. But because of aviveka, a lack of discrimination between what is me and what is not me, one confuses the two, one identifies with the two, and the properties of the upadhi, the mind upadhi, the physical body upadhi are transposed onto the physical body. So, in the first 5 verses of the Ātma-bodha, the development of ideas has been that he had established that Ajnana was the cause of samsara. Therefore, the removal of Ajnana is the nature of moksha. The removal of Ajnana can only happen because of Jnana, and therefore one must attain Jnana, he had first said. Then he had talked about why or how Avidya is the cause of samsara. He had talked about a macro projection and then a micro projection. And then he had gone on to say the macro projection or the macro adhyasa is essentially the superimposition of the world, the universe on the self. The micro projection is the superimposition of the body, mind, etc. And then he had classified this Vyashti Adhyasa, the micro projection, into three kinds. And that is what we had talked in verses 12, 13, and 14. Verse number 12 talked about the superimposition of the Sthula Sharira, the physical body. Verse number 13 had talked about the superimposition of the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body comprising the mind, the intellect, and prana. And in the 14th verse, which we just talked about, he talked about the superimposition of the Karana Sharira. So the physical body lasts only for this one life. At the end of this life, it'll essentially go away. The subtle body carries on for one srishti. The Karana Sharira is beginningless. It exists during srishti. In every srishti it has existed. And in Pralaya also it exists. And from this Karana Sharira, from this causal Sharira, the Sukshma Sharira and the Sthula Sharira emerge. The Sukshma Sharira emerges at the beginning of Srishti. The Sthula Sharira emerges during the time of the birth of the physical body. The Jiva, when he comes into this world, he takes that Sthula Sharira and comes into this world. Whereas the consciousness principle is independent. Atma is different from these three, is what Acharya had said. Now we will look at the next verse, which is verse number 15. Panchakoshadi yogena tattanmaya iva sthitaha shuddhatma nila vastradi yogena sphatiko yatha. So in this verse, we are talking about the idea of panchakoshas. Now, the Shariratraya and the panchakoshas are similar. Essentially, the same concept of the three bodies has been expanded into panchakoshas or the five sheaths. This idea occurs in the Taittiriya Upanishad, wherein the Atma has been described first by going from the grossest individual component, the grossest identification that we have of what is I. We go from the grossest to the subtlest. And therefore, through this exercise, what the Upanishad is teaching us is how to direct our intellect towards understanding who we really are. So the five sheets or five coverings are Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha. So the Annamaya Kosha is the physical body. This body, the organs, etc., all comprise of the Annamaya Kosha. The Pranamaya Kosha or the energy body comprises of all the functions of the body that are controlled by the Pancha Pranas. Prana, Apana, Vyana, Udana, Samana. And we had talked about this in the context of verse number 13 when we had discussed the Sukshma Sharira. So essentially, this governs the life principle in the body. So when the body is living, when the body is acting, the various activities of the body are all controlled by the Pranamaya Kosha. The distribution of energy from food, the digestion of food, the breathing, the circulation of blood, all of that is controlled by the Pranamaya Kosha. So this is the energy body. And then within that, subtler than that, is the Manomaya Kosha. So we are slowly directing our thought inwards. So starting off with our first identification is with this body. We are moving it inwards towards the prana, the how this body is actually functioning, the functioning principle of this body, and then we're taking it inwards towards the mind. And the Manomaya Kosha is the psychological body comprising of the mind. It is the psychological personality that we associate. I am an angry person, I'm a happy person, I'm a sad person. All of those various moods that we have, the emotions that we have, the psychological personality is what this referred to as the Manomaya Kosha. Subtler than the Manomaya Kosha is the intellectual personality or the Vijnanamaya Kosha. And here we are referring to the intellect, the analytical personality, the rational man that we're talking about, right? That we all talk about. The rational side of our personality, the thinking faculty, the intellectualization faculty is what is referred to as the Vijnanamaya Kosha. And then subtler than the intellectual body is the subconsciousness, is the Anandamaya Kosha, which is the unmanifest, the dormant, the hidden personality. So if you look at the parallel between the Shariratraya concepts and the Panchakosha concept, there's a very nice parallel. The Sthula Sharira corresponds to the Annamaya Kosha, and at the other end, the Karana Sharira corresponds with the Anandamaya Kosha, and the middle one, the Sukshma Sharira, corresponds to Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya Kosha. And here Acharya is saying Panchakoshadi Yogena. The word yoga refers to the attachment, the sense of attachment and identification that we have with these five koshas. So when we talk about who am I, what is my personality, our natural thinking, our natural identification is with these panchakoshas. We say, I am a Brahmana, I am a Brahmin, I am a Manushya, I am a human being, I am a male. All of that is what? An identification with the Annamaya Kosha, the physical body. Then underlying that, we say, when you're talking about the prana, we can say, I'm a very energetic personality. I have like, he's a go-getter. He does these things, right? So that is referring to the pranamaya kosha. I'm putting it in a very sthula way, a very gross way of explaining it. The pranamaya has all the various aspects. So we have the circulatory system, the digestive system, the respiratory system, all of that. If you look at the doctor, they will be focusing on the pranamaya kosha because their entire lives are devoted towards the sustenance of that prana. How do you keep this human body alive is the focus. So the identification of the prana, the pranamaya kosha will be very high. And then subtler than this pranamaya kosha is the manomaya kosha. So we identify with our minds. So I am happy, I am sad. All of this is what? A state of the mind, but because of our identification, we say I am that. So if the mind is facing trouble, we say I am facing trouble. So that is the identification with the manomaya kosha. Then the vijnanamaya kosha. Oh, I am intelligent, I am not intelligent. I cannot, I'm very confused, I'm not able to decide, I'm very decisive. All of these are what? Identification with that aspect of the personality. And then you have the Anandamaya Kosha. No one really identifies with the Anandamaya Kosha because the nature of the Anandamaya Kosha itself is subconscious. So a lot of the things that we don't even know we like, the raga and the dvesha, or like or dislike or whatever, they're all deeply embedded as vasanas or latent tendencies in the Anandamaya Kosha. And at some trigger, they will come up. So sometimes we will like, without knowing a reason, we will like or dislike something. All of that is because of the underlying subconsciousness or the Anandamaya Kosha. And again, we identify with that. We say all of these are aspects of our personality. So Acharya Shankara Bhagavatpada says, Panchakoshadi yogena tattan maya ivasthitaha. What happens is that consciousness, because of the close association with these bodies, the attachment with these sheets, these bodies, we become as though, we become as though one with these bodies. We start identifying with these bodies. So just like we take a movie or a book where we start identifying with the body, with the characters in the book or the characters in the movie, what happens? We are not watching it as an objective viewer or an objective reader anymore. We become it becomes subjective. It becomes us. So whatever problems that that character faces, it's as though we are facing those problems. The emotional whirlpool that that character goes through, we go through that also. That is why people will be sitting in watching TV and crying at TV serials or whatever. Why? Because they've identified so much with those characters, and because of which the problems of those characters affect us also. Now it is not just for TV serials. Our everyday life itself is like that. We have identified, or we have started to identify with the panchakoshas, panchakoshadi yogena, Atma tattanmaya ivastitah. The consciousness becomes as though one with it, starts identifying with it, and starts suffering the problems of it. Takes the problems of these panchakoshas upon itself as if it is its own problem. When it is hurt, it says, I am hurt. When it is born, it says, I am born. When it is traveling, it says, I am traveling. But what is the fact? I, the Atma, am Shuddha. Shuddha Atma, he's saying. I am pure consciousness. Why does he use the word Shuddha Atma? Because it is not affected by any of the problems of these five sheets. It is the all pervading Satchidananda Atma. I am neither affected by the arrival or the departure of the dream body or the dream universe in the dream. So why should I be affected by the arrival or departure of this physical body? Why should I be affected by the troubles of this body, or the waker's mind? It's a thought for us all. But we don't know this, and so we are suffering from samsara. And Acharya gives an example. How is this possible? How can one thing be mistaken for something else when we all know they are two different things? We all see, if you think about it, we'll say, no, this body is not me. But despite that, what happens when if somebody comes to hit us? Will we say, okay, please hit me? This body is not me. It's not me. I have crossed this. Will we say no? If somebody comes to hit us, we'll still try to run away, or we'll try to stop them or do something. So what does that mean? It's because the identification with this body only. And why is that happening? He gives an example. He says, just like a sphatika, a crystal, which is pure and clear, it does not have any color. Take a sphatika lingam, for example, the one used by Mahasannidhanam in the Chandramoulishwara Puja. If you take that sphatikam is actually crystal clear. But when Neela Vastram, when a blue cloth is brought next to it, that blueness of the cloth makes the crystal appear blue. But in reality, even when the cloth is touching the crystal, when it is like surrounding the crystal, even when the crystal is looking blue, is the crystal blue? In reality, it's not. It actually is a colorless crystal only, even when the cloth is in close contact with it. Even when the crystal appears to be blue, it is not blue. It's only an appearance. Similarly, even when the Atma, when the mind and the body's properties are as though appearing in the Atma, even though it appears as though the Atma is suffering, in reality, the Atma is not suffering at all. Because of the lack of viveka, because of a lack of conviction in that knowledge, because we haven't completely dropped the identification with that physical body, the mental body, the ego, what happens is that we start taking on the problems of the physical body, the mental body, the ego, as though they are our problems. Just like the crystal, which is actually colorless, appears blue and is completely unaffected by the cloth, the consciousness is completely unaffected by the problems of the body or the mind. But because of a false identification, we take on the properties of that as though they are our own problems. So this is what Shankaracharya is saying in this particular verse. So the body may undergo many changes, birth, youth, middle age, etc. Even when the body is undergoing these changes, even though I'm in the proximity of this changing body, I don't acquire any of these changes. I do not change. I may appear to be born, I may appear to become young, I may appear to become middle-aged, to be old and die, but there is really no change in I. As Bhagavan says in the Bhagavad Gita, Jayate mriyate va kadachina nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah ajo nityah shashvatoyam puranah na hanyate hanyamane sharire. Even when the sharira is hurt, even when it is killed, the Atma cannot be touched. There is no change whatsoever in the Atma. Okay, we will go to the next verse. Vapustushadibhih koshairyuktam yuktavaghatataha Atmanam antaram shuddham vivicha tandulam yatha. So with the previous verse, verse number 15, Shankaracharya's explanation of what is adhyasa is over. And he had essentially said that all the problems are false projections, they are mithya, unreal misconceptions, and any false projection only goes when the right knowledge comes. Similarly, like for example, when we talk about fake news, when a fact is not known, it becomes the object of several rumors, etc. It's become subject to gossip, opinion pieces, and whatnot. The reality is only one, the satyam is only one, but there is a lot of confusion about it. There's a lot of mithya, multiple theories are being talked about it. So how do you get out of the confusion? It is by knowledge of what is satyam. Only knowledge of the fact will clear it. And until knowledge comes, confusion will prevail. Similarly, adhyasa is because of the ignorance of the fact about myself. I am not known, and therefore I superimpose something else as I, and that causes further problems for me. There is no end to the problem unless jnana comes. So even death will not solve it. There will be another janma, and that janma will keep on going until jnana comes. Samsara will continue, adhyasa will continue. And Shankaracharya, from this verse onwards, takes up a new topic. And the topic here is essentially how to get this Atma Jnana. So far he had said Atma Jnana is the problem, Atma Jnana is the solution. And when we say how to get this Atma Jnana, we have to understand what is the nature of this Atma Jnana also. So let us look at another example. Now, with the eyes, we can see the world. Everything in the world that we can see, everything perceptible. There are some things that you cannot see. That I'm not talking about that. But in general, the eyes can see whatever is visually perceptible, the eyes can see. But there is one thing that the eyes cannot see, but which is visually perceptible. What is that? That is the eye themselves. The eye cannot see itself. It can see everything, but it cannot see itself. And how is it possible for the eye to see itself? If you ask, we say the only way it is possible if you have a mirror. So with the mirror, you'll be able to look at it. The eye will be able to look at itself. And so the eye can see the eye only with the mirror. Similarly, the Atma is the universal subject. It is the universal witness. It sees everything, but nothing can see it. The Atma cannot see itself also. Just like the eye cannot see itself also, the Atma cannot see itself unless you have a darpanam. And what is a darpanam or a mirror? It is the Shastra darpanam, the mirror that is scripture. And if you look at scripture, what is the difference between scripture and science? If you ask, all the science that is known to man, that we today classify as science, is an objective field. It reveals the object. It never reveals the subject. You can know things, but you cannot know the knower. The only field, the only science through which you can know the knower is Shastra, is Vedanta. Vedanta is the only thing that reveals the subject. It doesn't talk about the object. So, therefore, if the question is asked, how can you get Atma Jnana? The answer that the Veda itself says is it is through Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Atmavare drashtavya shrotavyo mantavyo nididhyasitavya is what the Upanishad says. So Shravana is to get the knowledge. Manana is to get the conviction in the knowledge. It means doubtless knowledge is conviction. And Nididhyasana is to assimilate that knowledge, to make it a part of us, so that when the mind and the body are facing troubles, you can overcome those purely on the strength of that knowledge, because it is available to us like something held in our hands. like an amla fruit, hastamalakavat, in our hands. It is available to us, which we can use whenever facing troubles. We can invoke that knowledge and remind ourselves of our true nature. And so Shankaracharya from verse number 16 to verse number 31 will talk about Shravana and Manana. And from verse number 32 onwards, he'll talk about Nididhyasana. So what Vedanta says, how does it reveal the self? The Vedanta says that in our conception of I, Aham, there are always two aspects. One is the evident known aspect, the explicit aspect, and the other is the hidden, the non-evident, inexplicit factor. The visible factor is the panchakoshas, the physical body, annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha. When I say evident, it means not perceptible. The physical body is perceptible, the sukshma sharira is not perceptible, but you can know it. You know it is there. And we have identified. So whenever we talk about I, one aspect is this, is the panchakoshas. That is the evident aspect. And that's one aspect which is not known. And that invisible, unknown, hidden factor that is present in every I thought, in fact, it's present in every thought, is consciousness, is Chaitanya. There are many names: Jnanam, Chit, Chetana, Pragyanam. So, this Aham, this I, is always a mixture of Atma and Anatma, Chaitanya and Jada. Chedachat Granthi, it's called Aham. It is a mixture, an intimate mixture of the consciousness and the inert. So, and the way to know what this consciousness is to separate this inert aspects from the I. That is the only way to know consciousness. It is to remove all those aspects that are not I, that are anatma, from the notion of I. That is how we can get a direct knowledge of consciousness. And so being able to separate the consciousness from those anatma is the first step. And then the next step is to claim this consciousness as me and to discard the anatma as mithya. Instead of claiming the mortal body, instead of claiming the problematic mind as me, you start claiming the Shuddha Satchidananda Atma as me. So this body, this mind is only a temporary medium. I am different from this. So that's what he says. Atmanam antaram shuddham vivichyat. May you, the student, separate the antaratma, the inner atma, the I. He said the thing is to know the atma directly, you have to start with the I. And from the I, you go inwards to identify what the consciousness is. So may you know the antaratma, the internal atma, consciousness principle. And what kind of consciousness principle? Shuddha atma, shuddham vivichyat. Vivichyat means separated. And it's shuddham, it is very pure, because unlike the body, unlike the mind, which has all these problems, the atma is free of problems. And why should you separate it? Because the I, as we said, is a mixture. Consciousness has been mixed up, intimately mixed up with something. With what? That's what he's saying. Koshaihi. It's been intimately mixed up with the panchakoshas. Koshair yuktam. And what kind of koshas? The several personalities, Annamaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, etc. And here he is giving the example of Vapustushadivihi koshaihi. So just like the rice grain inside the husk of which is covered by a husk in a paddy, similarly, the Atma has been covered by the Panchakoshas, the 5 sheets. So the Atma is being compared to the rice grain. The Panchakoshas are being compared to the husk. And so how do you remove that rice grain? You remove it by pounding it. So you pound the paddy, the husk will come out and you can take out the rice grain. So similarly, we have to pound this I. And what does pounding mean? Pounding here means the Vedanta Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam, the Atma Vichara, the Mahavakya Vichara. So, for example, in the Chandogya Upanishad, the father Uddala Karuni tells his son 9 times, Tattvamasi, 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 Tattvamasi. He keeps telling him. Why? At each time, a different doubt keeps coming up about what is this Tat? What am I? What is that? And each time the father keeps clearing that. So it's an intellectual exercise of removing the anatma, of removing the misconceptions. In the case of paddy, sometimes some of these grains you can very easily pound and the rice will come out. But sometimes you have to keep going at it, keep pounding it, and only then it will come. Similarly, for some shishyas who are done this Vedanta Savana Manana Nididhyasana in their past lives, who have paripakvam, who have ripened in that state, that once they hear this Mahavakyam, that is enough, and they will be free from samsara. But for the rest of us, we have to keep doing this Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. We have to keep following this, keep engaging in this Atma Vichara, self-inquiry, and then we are able to separate the Atma from the Anatma. And what kind of pounding? So Acharya uses the word avaghataha. Avaghata means pounding, literally. He says, just like you pound the paddy to get the rice, you pound the Atma, the I. And what is that? Yukti avaghatataha. It is not a physical pounding. Nobody is asking you to physically pound you. They're saying you intellectually do that exercise to separate the anatma from the I. And just like tandulam yatha, just like you extract the rice grain from the paddy, similarly extract the consciousness from this I, from this intimate mixture of atma and anatma. So that completes this verse. We will take a look at the next verse. Sada sarvagatopyatma na sarvatra avabhasate buddhaveva avabhaseta swacheshu pratibimbavate. So here, the nature of consciousness is being talked about in these verses. So Shankaracharya says that consciousness is not limited by the physical boundaries of the body. It actually goes beyond the body. The body may have boundaries, but consciousness is limitless. It is limitless both in terms of time. It has always existed. It will always exist also, even when the body is not there, even where the body is not there, consciousness is there. It is the one consciousness that is there everywhere. However, it is only recognizable within the body. Consciousness outside the body is not recognizable. So consciousness within the body is recognized as what? It is recognized as Chidabhasa, the reflection of consciousness, the life principle. What gives me the notion aham, I, the the moment one wakes up, we are automatically aware of our own existence. What is that? That is Chidabhasa, the reflection of consciousness within the mind. And wherever the mind is there, that Chidabhasa is there. And because the Chidabhasa is automatically evident, we say that we have a feeling that consciousness is within the body, because there is no Chidabhasa outside, because the external matter is incapable of reflecting consciousness, we are not able to recognize that consciousness outside the body. So, to give an example, if you look at a full moon night where the moon is shining bright, beautifully, it's a full moon, there is wonderful moonlight everywhere, and we say, what a beautiful moonlight that is. But really speaking, it is not moonlight, because the moon is not a luminous body, it is not a self-luminous body. It is actually reflected sunlight that we are calling as moonlight. So that is the equivalent of our Chidabhasa here. The moon is our mind. That's why in Shastra the mind is compared to the moon. Why? Because it reflects consciousness. Similarly, the moon reflects the sunlight and it appears to us as moonlight. But if you look at it, is the sunlight, if you ask, is there sunlight at night time? We'll say no. But actually there is sunlight. Why? You can see the reflection. You can see the reflected light, the moonlight you can see. But in the night sky, is there sunlight anywhere else? We will say no. There is no, we cannot see it. Then the question becomes, how is it that the sunlight, which is all pervading, is only seen where the moon is seen and it is not seen elsewhere? It is because wherever the moon is, there is a reflecting medium. The moon is the reflecting medium. There are no other reflecting mediums around that. Therefore, you're only able to see the sunlight wherever the moon is. Even though sunlight is all pervading, at night time you only see where the moon is because that reflecting medium is there. And so when the moon is going around the earth, right, it appears as though the the moonlight is traveling, but really speaking, it's not the moonlight that is traveling. It is not this. The light is the moon is the one that is traveling. Sunlight is there everywhere. Similarly, when within the body there is the mind, and in that mind there is the reflection of the consciousness. So wherever the body goes, wherever the mind goes, we say consciousness is going, I am coming. Really speaking, I am neither going nor coming. And this is what Shankaracharya is saying. So consciousness is everywhere, but only where there is a mind it gets reflected and it is able to be discerned. When the mind moves, we say the consciousness is moving, but it is not consciousness that moves, it is only the mind. The mind is inert, consciousness is not. Consciousness is the conscious principle. Mind is inert. So this differentiation of consciousness from the inert is the first thing. The first thing we have to realize is the mind is not a conscious body. Mind is only a reflecting medium. Just like the moon is not a luminous body, it's only a reflecting medium. There is no such thing called moonlight. It is the reflection of the sunlight on the moon that we are calling as moonlight. Similarly, the mind which appears to be conscious is not because the mind is conscious, it is because there is consciousness that is being reflected in that mind. So it enlivens the mind, so to speak. And therefore, that what we say as that life principle, because of the presence of the so-called conscious mind, is actually is an independent principle. That life principle is consciousness, the mind is a reflecting medium, and when the consciousness falls on the mind, we say, yes, I am there. And in deep sleep, when the mind is turned, there is no reflecting medium. So we say, oh, I wasn't there, I don't know. But really speaking, you are always there, even when the mind is not there. Even where the mind is not there, you always there are there. Outside, so that's why outside the body there is no sense of aham with things outside. There is no sense of I with those entities that are outside the body. The sense of I is only with the body, because the mind that is present in the body, the awareness of I is only present wherever the mind is present, because that reflection is present in the body. We say I am here but I am not there, but really speaking, I am everywhere, but I am aware of it only here. So the first viveka, the first discrimination that we have to do is between what is consciousness and what is inert. The body is not conscious, the mind is not conscious, it is consciousness. It's an independent principle from these two things. The chit jada viveka is the first thing. Second viveka is of satyam. One is satyam and one is mithya. So what is satyam? The body and the mind are not satyam. Its consciousness is satyam. The inert matter is mithya. Anatma is the inert principle is mithya. Atma, the consciousness principle, is satyam. And the third viveka is of these two principles, the identification we should have is with the satya atma, not the mithya anatma. So instead of claiming I am the body, instead of claiming the mithya body, the mithya mind as I, we should start learning to claim the satya atma as I. That is the real I. So when we shift that perception, when we shift that identification from the mind and the body to the Atma, that is the time that the entire life that we are leading will become like a show for us, like a drama that we can that is there for our entertainment. It is a Leela Matram. So this is what he's saying here. Sada sarvagatopi Atma. Atma is sarvagataha. It is sarvagataha means it's all pervading. So you don't have to expand your consciousness to cover the entire world. Your consciousness is already all pervading. And when? Not just at some time, not after jnana. Sada sarvagataha. It is always all pervading. However, as we said, just like the wherever the moon is, you can experience sunlight, but you cannot experience sunlight in other parts because there is no reflecting medium of the sky, because there is no reflecting medium. Similarly, Acharya is saying, Buddhau eva avabhaseta. So consciousness is experienced only in the reflecting medium, and the reflecting medium here is the mind or the intellect, buddhi. You can use for mind or the intellect here. So where the buddhi is, consciousness is reflected. So consciousness is there even in this chair that I'm sitting on. But you are not able to experience that consciousness because the consciousness does not have, the chair does not have the capacity to reflect that consciousness. But the mind has that capacity to do that. So just to give an example, now the if you take a book or anything or piece of paper, I am not able to see my own face in that piece of paper or the book, but I'm able to see my face in the mirror. Why is that? Both are matter. So if I'm able to see my face in the mirror, I should also be able to see my face in the book. But no, I'm only able to see it in the mirror. Similarly, consciousness is everywhere. The chair also should be able to reflect it because just like the chair is inert, the mind is also inert. But why is it that the mind is able to do it? Acharya says this is because the mind is clean, it's clear, it is able to reflect it. And that is why he's saying Swacheshu Pratibimbavat. So the mind is able to reflect consciousness and we are able to experience it as Chidabhasa, as a reflection of consciousness because of its Swachhata, because of its clarity. That is the nature of that material with which the mind is made. It is also, mind is also matter. So just like a clean mirror is able to reflect a face, pratibimba means an image, is able to do a reflection, but a piece of paper is not able to. Similarly, the mind is able to reflect consciousness, but the other matter is not able to reflect consciousness. So, with that, we have concluded this verse also. It establishes an important principle that the Atma is all pervading, right? But the only way to experience the Atma is within the mind. Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam Parame Vyoman is what the Upanishad says. He who knows the Atma in the Guha, in the cave. And what is that cave? Parame Vyoman, in the cave of this, the highest space. What it actually means is that the Parame is referring to the mind. And the cave that is the mind, in the space that is the mind, it's only there you're able to experience the Atma. Why? Because through as Chidabhasa. It's only the mind which is able to reflect the Atma. You're able to claim the Atma. You're able to experience it directly. So, just like the mind is the cause of samsara also because all the wrong notions of the self are also held in the mind. And it is the mind only which is the medium of moksha also because you realize the Atma using the mind itself. It's only in the mind can you claim Aham Brahmasmi. You're not able to claim Aham Brahmasmi if you're a chair or a table or a tree. Only a conscious human mind is able to claim that because it has the capacity to reflect that consciousness. It has the viveka to discriminate between satyam and mithya, chit and jada. Satyam and mithya, and chit meaning consciousness, and jada meaning inert. And therefore, with that thought, let us bring this talk to a successful conclusion. We will take up verse number 18 onwards in the next talk. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.